Hello everybody, I hope you're well. So this week I'm making some more mini cards and I'm going to be using my natural handmade inks. This one is ink made from acorns and I'm going to use a few other inks, and I'm going to just do a really simple, slightly abstract birch wood scene. I'm going to try and work quite quickly and quite loosely, and then if I feel like it at the end I might just add a few little finer details. And I'm going to try and use a mix of ink and some of my watercolour paints, but this is a bit of an experiment, so I'm just going to see how it goes really. So I've just added just some splashes really, and I'm going to start now with my ink made from alder cones mixed with some iron, which makes it darker. It's not as black as I hoped it would be, but it does go quite dark, and it seems to get darker as it oxidizes on the paper, which is great. It's not really black, but it's black enough for this, and once it's dried I'll be able to build up a little bit as well. So I'm just adding the bottom part of each of the cards. I've divided the paper up into 6, so this will be the bottom part of the cards. So once I've done this, I'm going to use another brush and just start to map out some basic tree shapes, just using the ink that's already there because it's really wet. I didn't use wet on wet paper for this was a wet on dry technique, but this ink seems to sit on the paper for quite a while before absorbing, so there's plenty of ink to just drag it out into some basic tree shapes. So I'll just use these as my guide, which I'll then add to a bit later on. So now that all the trees are mapped out, I'm just adding a few splashes to start working on a bit of the soil and background flora and fauna. And then what I'm going to do is, using the darker ink again, I'm just going to go back and start adding a few details onto the trees and a few light and shade areas, because birch trees tend to be quite easy to paint really for mediums such as watercolour like this, because you just need to use the brush to just do some little stipples and some little lines and some little marks, and they end up looking like silver birch trees. So it's pretty easy, you can't really go wrong. So I'm just going to start drawing this out on some of the trees, not really paying a lot of attention to fine detail just yet. In fact, I'm not going to pay attention to fine detail at all, but I'm just going to add, just so I can define where the trees are a little bit more. So I've let the inks dry, and now I'm going back in with an even darker ink. I think this one is one of my oak gall inks with iron. It's still not as dark as I wanted it, but it is darker, more of a black than a browny black, unlike the other ink that I used. So I'm just going over again the areas that I want the little barky bits on the trees, and just to add a little bit more definition. The inks took quite a while to dry because the paper did get quite wet, but that's okay. I just set it aside. So I'm not going to do all of the trees because I'm going to leave some of the ones in the background so they end up being lighter, so they look like they're further away. And I'm going to extend some of the trunks down in the foreground, just using the black. So I've just added a few little branches, and I'm going to start adding some little grasses as well at the bottom, just to add a little bit more interest to the front part. And then I'll add some grasses and a few splashes as well. And then what I'm going to do is let it dry a little bit, but then go in with some white paint to bring out the white bark parts of the birch trees, because those are the parts that make the trees really stand out, and I think they'll look really nice. So I'm just adding some splashes at the bottom just to add some texture, and then I'm going to add some little grasses just really simply and nothing too fancy. So now I'm going to go in with white paints. I've decided to use it while the ink is still wet, just to see how the two mix, because I'd be interested to see especially how the black iron ink mixes with this, because the iron oak gall ink can sometimes be quite grainy in how it separates out, and it looks really pretty when it does that, and it will give a really nice bark effect on the birch trees if it does that. So I'm just going to see what happens, and if I don't like it, I'm going to go back in and add a little bit more detail with some black paint at the end. Finished with the white paint, and I've decided to go in again just on top of some of the areas of the white paint with some of the black ink again, just to see if it spreads out a little bit. And I've got a little blot there, but that's okay because I'll mop that up later. And because the ink with the white paint is giving quite an interesting effect, quite granulaty in places, so I just wanted to add to that a little bit more. So this is still part of the fun of it, it's all experimentation. And at the end of the day, if I don't like anything, I don't have to use these as cards, and if I do like them, I'll use them. So I've almost finished adding some of the finer details here. And then what I'm going to do is let it all dry, because again, I've got the page very wet. And then I'll go back in and have a look and see if I want to add any sharper details with my black paint. Because these inks, although they've got quite dark, they're not quite dark enough for some of the finer details that I might want to add later. But I'll let it dry and see how it looks. Obviously when it dries, it's probably going to dry a little bit lighter as well. Okay, so it's all dry, and I've decided that I definitely want to add some finer details. So I'm just going to add a few little circle areas on the bark, just to give the impression of little knotty areas, and I'm going to add some finer details of the branches just to sharpen the whole image up a little bit. I'm just using now my black handmade watercolour paint, which is made from soot, chimney soot, and I'm just going in and adding wherever I want some little branches, some little dots, some lines on the birch, just to define the birch bark a little bit more. And you can just keep playing like this until you're happy. And I'll post a picture of what the finished piece looks like at the end. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you again soon.